Good evening and welcome back to K-Red Reads. I've got a special double feature set of spooky stories for you tonight. They both take place in attics. The first one's actually quite creepy and the second one is a little more of a palate cleanser, I guess. And I do have a couple of trigger warnings listed, so check those out before we start just in case. It is called Creak.
Creak by Kurt Newton.
The house needed work. Plaster, paint, polish, a light bulb here, a new fitting there. It was a beautiful old Victorian, emphasis on was, emphasis on old. But Janie Levinsky knew what she wanted, and there was nothing her husband Michael was going to say to talk her out of it. "Mommy, is this our new house?" Janie looked at their 6-year-old daughter Jessica, and then at her husband, who simply shrugged his shoulders. "I guess it is, honey," Michael answered for her. Janie put her arms around Michael and kissed him on the lips. "Let's go sign some papers," she said. From high above, the attic windows stared down upon the family of 3 as they got into their car and drove off. Behind the windows, surrounded by age and dust and silence, something creaked. Moving day. Janie and Michael enlisted help from their friends with bribes of pizza and beer. It was a long day filled with activity and laughter, and only a few broken items. Jessica played ring around the boxes and hide-and-go-seek with Eve, another little girl stranded with nothing to do but watch the grown-ups shuffle in and out of the big house. When it was Jessica's turn to hide, she ran upstairs, leaving her newfound friend with her face against the refrigerator door counting. The staircase was wide and winding, and by the time Jessica reached the top, she was nearly out of breath. The upstairs carpet swallowed her footsteps. She passed by first one door, then another. She remembered these rooms from when her mom and dad first looked at the house with the realtor lady. Jessica kept walking until she reached the end of the hall. At the end was a narrow door that led to another staircase that led to the attic. 9, 10, here I come, ready or not, came her friend's voice from below. Jessica heard tiny shoes running up the hardwood stairs after her. Jessica opened the narrow door and stepped inside. The door shut behind her. "I'm gonna find you." Jessica stepped up onto the first step of the staircase, her heart pounding in her chest. She felt invisible, as if she were in a closet. "It's only a matter of time, Jessie. I'm getting warmer. I can hear you breathing." Jessica didn't really believe Eve could hear her, but she wasn't taking any chances. She began to back up the narrow stairs, careful not to make any sounds. When she reached the top, she couldn't believe what she saw. The attic was huge and dusty and dark. The floorboards seemed to go on forever. There were windows in the shapes of half moons, like sleepy eyes, dust and cobweb covered. Daylight struggled through them. There were thick posts like telephone poles that ran from floor to ceiling. Wide beams ran crosswise overhead. It was neat and a little bit scary. "I'm gonna find you," Eve called, but she sounded less confident now. "Creak." "What was that?" Jessica's inner voice whispered. She turned her head in the direction of the noise. In the middle of the room sat a large wooden chest with gold hinges. It looked like a big toy box. Jessica took 2 steps toward it. Creak. Maybe it was her own feet making the noise. The floor was old, and old things made strange noises, but she could swear it was coming from the box. "Come on, Jessie! No fair!" Her friend was tiring of the game. Eve's voice trailed farther and farther away. Creak. There was something special about this place, thought Jessica, and something really special about that box. She walked over to the chest and stood before it. She waited. Her heartbeat was all she heard. Then, creak. She smiled. Then she reached down to lift the lid. Downstairs, Janie saw Eve sitting on the sofa, her arms laced across her chest. "Where's Jess?" she asked the girl. "I don't know." "Where do you think she went?" "She's upstairs, I think, hiding. I couldn't find her. She doesn't play fair." "Upstairs, huh?" Janie put what she had in her hands down onto the floor. She didn't like Jessica running up and down the staircase. It was too dangerous. When she reached the top of the stairs, Janie called for her daughter. There was no answer. She checked every room, every closet, looked under every bed. She even checked behind the dressers. After all, a 6-year-old could squeeze herself into quite a small space. "Jess, stop playing now and answer me." Not a sound. Maybe she wasn't up here, thought Janie. Maybe Eve was mistaken and Jessica was sitting inside one of the kitchen cupboards waiting to be found. Janie was about to head downstairs when her ears pinned back. Creak. The sound came from the end of the hall. But the only thing at the end of the hall was the door leading up to the attic. That door was locked, off limits. She and Mike had agreed the stairs were too steep, the potential for danger too great for their curious daughter. But Janie needed to be sure. She walked to the end of the hall, and sure enough, the door's ornate 100-year-old knob rattled in her hand, but did not turn. Relieved, Janie headed for the stairwell. Creak! And stopped. She knew the house was old. She knew creaks in old houses were as common as aches and pains in the bones of the elderly. She also knew her daughter. Call it mother's intuition, but Janie couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. She reached into her back pocket. Maybe the attic door had been left unlocked. Maybe Jess went up the narrow stairs and the door closed behind her and locked. But why wouldn't she answer? Why isn't she kicking and screaming and crying to be let out? Janie began to panic. She couldn't find the key the realtor had given her. It was an old skeleton key like the ones found at flea markets. A simple, stupid thing to open a simple, stupid lock. "Jessica!" Janie pounded on the attic door. "Jessica, are you up there?" She tried the knob again, and to her surprise, it turned in her palm. The door opened. She rushed up the narrow stairway. "Jess?" Her voice sounded shrill and weak in the still, lifeless air. She saw the chest in the middle of the room and her throat constricted. Tears filled the corners of her eyes. As she walked toward the chest, she remembered the plans she and Jim had for this room. A study for him, an arts and crafts studio for herself, a playroom for Jessica, a nursery for the new baby, if and when that time came. Janie crouched in front of the old chest and slowly lifted its lid, and their lives changed. Downstairs, Janie's scream was heard by everyone. After the investigation, Janie and Mike were told to move on with their lives. It was an accident. Their friends stopped by to check in on them now and then to see how they were coping, to provide an open ear or a shoulder to cry on. But eventually, the silence of the Levinsky household became too depressive, and everyone just stayed away. Janie blamed herself for not keeping an eye on her only child. Michael blamed himself for not recognizing the old chest as a hazard. And when they had tired of bearing the weight of the guilt themselves, they set it down and blamed each other. It was an accident. Babies drown in bathtubs filled with 6 inches of water. It was an accident. Kids are backed over by their parents' cars while playing in the driveway. It was an accident. Children crawl into things they can't get out of and suffocate. An empty freezer, an old wooden chest. It's never easy to understand, but it's a part of life. And for whatever reason, these things happen. 4 months after the death of her daughter, Janie Levinsky stopped trying to convince herself that these things just happen, when she finally made the trip back upstairs to the attic. Her return wasn't prompted by the idea that it would be therapeutically healing or because she was struck with a sudden sentimental yearning, although Oprah told her that she must and will eventually do these things. No, Janie found herself scaling the steep, narrow attic staircase because in the silence of the afternoon, a silence she occupied all too often since her husband went back to work and left her to her unpredictable tears and her daily medication, she heard footsteps, running playfully, followed by laughter, coming from the attic. Janie cautiously peered up over the top step and into the open space beyond. She expected to see Jessica as she last remembered her, dressed in her little blue jumper, a smile as bright as the sun, getting ready to make another mad dash to go hide from Eve. But Jessica wasn't there. In place of the previous emptiness, the attic now hosted Michael's computer desk, a bookshelf, a small refrigerator, and a recliner. A large braided rug covered the plank flooring in the middle of the room. Michael had also moved his weight bench up there. The old wooden chest was now a coffee table, only instead of coffee cups, it was crowned with empty beer bottles. It looked like a bachelor's apartment, thought Janie. Perhaps that's how Michael felt. After all, she was hardly there for him, locked up in her own one-room world of guilt and grief. And when she did come out, the distance between them was most times too difficult to bridge. She walked over to the chest. A sense of déjà vu washed through her. She crouched down and ran her fingers along the chest's edges. She caressed its smooth wooden surface and the cold metal corner reinforcements. She cleared the top of empty bottles and lifted the lid. Her daughter lay inside, her face tinged with blue, her eyes closed as if she were sleeping. Janie looked away as tears flooded her eyes. When she looked back, Jessie was sitting upright, her face still blue. She had a smile from ear to ear. "You found me, Mommy! Now it's your turn to hide!" Her daughter giggled. Janie felt her daughter's breath upon her face. It smelled of fish and sour milk. Janie fell backward and crawled for the stairwell, her heart racing in her chest. Janie didn't look back as she fled the attic, but she could hear the creak of little girl bones chasing after her. "I saw her, Michael. She's up there." Michael had come home to find Janie locked in their bedroom. Michael held her as they sat on the bed together. "Janie, listen to yourself. You must be having a reaction to your medication. I'm calling Dr. Hemmingson." Janie pulled away. "No! I saw her! Her face was blue!" Janie's eyes grew as wide as Easter eggs. "We have to help her, Michael!" "No, Janie. Our Jessica is at St. Columba Cemetery. We buried her, remember? She's in the ground. Now please, stop this." "It hid her soul! Hide and go seek! Now she wants us to play. Don't you see?" Janie's eyes looked toward the ceiling. "You want to ruin it all, don't you? You're not satisfied that our Jessie's gone. You have to throw it all away?" Michael grabbed her by the shoulders. "I'm here, Janie. It's just us now. We can try again. We can have more children." She stared at him. "But she isn't gone. She's up there, Michael. Don't you believe me?" "I believe you need some professional help." "You don't believe me?" Janie looked away, a veil of disillusionment descending over her features. Maybe she didn't see what she had seen, or heard what she had heard. Maybe this was all a dream that she would soon wake up from. "Janie, listen to me." "I'm tired, Michael. Can we do this some other time?" She lowered herself onto her pillow. Her husband sat in silence. "I love you, Janie," he said finally. "But I won't sit by and watch you destroy yourself and our marriage in the process." He got up then and walked out. When he closed the door behind him, Janie closed her eyes and drifted off to sleep. Michael sat in his recliner, 2 beers emptied, a third ready to join the first 2. His nerves were calm now, settled into a comfortable bath of ennui. Outside, the night pressed against the attic windows. The house was still. Michael liked it up here. It was high and away from everything else. It was almost as if he were floating above the world and all its problems. Michael didn't believe in evil spirits. The old chest beneath his feet was just an old chest. And if Jessica's spirit were trapped inside of it, the result couldn't be anything but beautiful and sweet, because that's the kind of child she was. So when he heard the floor creak and saw his daughter standing in the corner, hand in hand with a young woman, he was more surprised than shocked, more intrigued than fearful. Jessica was smiling. The woman was also smiling. The woman was beautiful. She wore a long, flowing gown, white as window curtains, and just as sheer. As they walked toward him, Michael didn't think it strange that he could see the shadows of furniture behind them, through them. All he could think about was the way his life used to be, when Janie was Janie, and Jessica was there to leap into his arms when he walked through the front door after a long day's work, the way he wished it could be again. His daughter led the woman over to where he was seated, almost as if to introduce her to him. The woman proceeded to push the recliner back. Creak. Michael closed his eyes as the woman pressed her lips against his. He felt a strange sensation and realized he couldn't breathe. His eyes flew open, and what was staring at him was hideous. The woman's skin clung to her face in dry, leathery strips. Gray strands of hair sprouted from her bony skull. Her eyes were black pools of nothingness. Her lips crawled with tiny movements. Jessica giggled at her side, her face now a pale blue. Michael couldn't move. All he could feel was the life escaping him, as if something had stuck a spigot into his heart and had opened it up full. Janie entered a fitful dream. Her body struggled to pull her awake, but inside her sleeping consciousness, she was an unwilling spectator to a domestic squabble. The man was shouting, "I married you so you could bear me children, not babies born without a breath of life in them." "But we can try again," the woman replied, sobbing. The house was the same, only newer. Beautiful hardwood furniture surrounded them, cherry and mahogany. Lace doilies sat beneath crystal lamps which sat atop marble end tables. Patterned wallpaper adorned the walls. A large Persian rug lay perfectly on the floor. The man was dressed in a fine suit, the woman in a beautiful flowing gown. Each bore hairstyles that hadn't been worn in over 100 years. The woman clutched at the husband's arm. "I love you! Won't you hold me?" "Love?" The husband looked at her with disdain. "I hold the livelihoods of 2,000 families in my hands, and I can't even have a family of my own. Do you know how that makes me feel? It's a disgrace." He turned away from her. "Leave me now." "But Philip!" "Get out!" The woman ran from the room in tears. She rushed upstairs. Janie followed her. At first, the woman entered the bedroom. She looked around desperately. Finally, she stared at herself in the mirror. Janie could also see herself in the mirror standing behind the woman. The woman rushed past her and out into the hallway and up to the attic. The attic was stacked with moving crates. Some had fallen and excelsior had spilled out onto the floor. Amid the jumble of items sat the chest. It was new and shined a golden honey brown. The woman kneeled before it and opened its lid. Inside were linens, small knitted clothing, a silver baby's rattle, a music box. It was a hope chest created in anticipation of the arrival of a newborn. The woman closed the chest. Tears stained her cheekbones. She set about unraveling some wire used to secure one of the crates. She stood the chest up on end and climbed on top of it. She looped the wire over the top attic beam and wrapped the two ends around her neck and twisted it tightly. Janie watched in horror as the woman then kicked the chest out from under her and fell with a sudden jerk, the wire sinking deep into her throat, cutting off her airway. The last image Janie saw before she woke was the woman's eyes staring hopelessly into space, her face turning a light shade of blue. Janie rushed up the attic stairs. "Michael!" she yelled. She reached the top step. "Michael, we've got to get out of here!" And stood in disbelief. Michael was fully reclined. His neck was bent, mouth open, his face a now familiar cyanotic blue. He was absolutely still. Jane numbly walked over to him. She wanted to cry, but tears no longer seemed to hold much meaning. "Now you believe me," she said as she reached out and caressed his face. Janie turned. Creak. The old wooden chest sat at her husband's feet. It was touching him. It shouldn't be touching him, she thought, and shoved the chest away. She heard a giggle. Her heart sank. What if Jessica was still inside? She reached down and lifted the lid. The chest was empty. Creak! Another giggle, this time accompanied by a grown woman's laughter. Janie looked up. Her daughter was standing just 3 feet away. Standing beside her was the woman from the dream. Creak! They looked the same as the day they both died. Then they changed, their faces transforming into the hideous death masks they presently wore. Janie stepped back in horror, into the arms of her husband, who picked her up and forcibly placed her in the open chest and shut the lid tight. The young couple stood on the front lawn of the Victorian and admired its stateliness. The woman turned to her husband. "Are you sure we can afford this?" "Not a problem," her husband said. "I've got it all figured out." "Did you figure in Junior here?" She pointed to her stomach, which bulged beneath her dress. "He or she will be in diapers and formula up to his or her kneecaps," he said. "That's not very deep." "You know what I mean." They gazed at the old home. "Why do you think it sat empty for so long?" "Probate, probably. But whatever the reason, it's a steal." They turned to each other and decided with a kiss. "Let's go tell the realtor the good news." From high above, the attic windows stared down upon the expectant couple as they got into their car and drove away. Behind the windows, surrounded by age and dust and silence, something creaked. The end. So tell me what you thought about that one. I really enjoyed reading it. We're going to move on to our next one. Like I said, this is really a cute one. It's kind of a nice little palate cleanser after that last one. This one is called Atticat by Jennifer Hudak. Atticat by Jennifer Hudak. The cat is the only one who can see us. His name is Jekyll, and he's half gray and half white. Sometimes he ignores us, but sometimes he stares at us unblinking until we give up and melt back into the walls. Jekyll isn't afraid of ghosts, but sometimes when he stares at us like that, we are a little afraid of Jekyll. Every ghost has a place, and this house is ours. We don't know why. None of us died here. None of us even stepped foot in this house when we were alive, and yet here we are. We're not complaining. This house suits us. We hide inside cupboards and look out of mirrors and take turns bouncing on the bed. We haunt every room and closet and alcove. Everywhere but the attic. no one goes into the attic. The hallway beneath the attic is where we first appear when we arrive in the house upon our death. It's where we always return when we're not paying attention. Some of us are drawn here more often than others, but none of us can stay away forever. Over and over again, we find ourselves huddled in the hallway, disoriented and disconsolate, aware only of the trap door looming overhead, getting larger by the second, air whistling through the cracks, a strange suction. If we were alone, we'd be drawn straight upwards like smoke. But here in our house, we're not alone. We surround each other, linking arms, reminding ourselves that we had arms, that we have them still, even if no one but Jekyll can see them. The energy of our collective presence allows us to remember ourselves, our names, our personalities. We cast nervous eyes at the trap door and coax ourselves away from it. We watch out for each other. We keep each other grounded. We remain. Callie, a living woman, owns both Jekyll and this house. She doesn't seem to care that the house is haunted. At least, she's never said anything about it. Not even when Giles rattles his chains or Francis knocks a painting off the wall. Francis cheerfully tells us he was always loud and impulsive and destructive, even when he was alive, so it's no wonder he became a poltergeist when he died. But Callie doesn't seem to mind even Francis. She just hangs the paintings back up, making sure they're level, and checks to make sure he didn't do anything really stupid, like blow out the pilot light on the stove. We are not sure if Callie knows the attic exists. She walks underneath the trap door every day as she moves between the bedroom and the stairs, but never looks up. Still, every time she passes beneath it, we cringe. Rose thinks that's why this house is our place. She thinks we're guardians sent to keep Callie and Jekyll from ever going into the attic. She thinks that's why we can't stay away from it, no matter how much we try. Giles, with a pompous shake of his chains, says that Callie is unaware of us, as most living people are. Susan disagrees. She believes that Callie is simply unafraid of death, and being unafraid is particularly suited to owning a haunted house. Kenneth can never decide whether Callie is unaware or unafraid, but he insists that whichever it is, it's Jekyll who keeps her that way. Kenneth has always had a soft spot for Jekyll. Kenneth is our most recent arrival. He appeared in the hallway beneath the attic 2 years ago. By the time we found him, Jekyll was already there, giving Kenneth a slow blink as he began to lose cohesion and float, mist-like, toward the trap door. None of this was unusual. Jekyll always gets to the new arrivals before we do, and the call of the attic is strongest when we first appear. But when we gathered around Kenneth, even when we whispered our names and showed him our true faces, he resisted awakening. Giles tried to loop his chains around Kenneth's waist, but they slipped right through. Francis threw himself at the mist, but only scattered it further. Susan's mouth widened into a panicked oval. We'd never lost anyone to the attic, not once. But the longer Kenneth held out, the more he decohered, and the longer we stayed to help, the more we risked decohering with him. Even now, the crowns of our heads flickered like candles, pulling and stretching and narrowing toward the trap door. Only when Rose let out a banshee wail did Kenneth shudder and gather himself back together, settling onto the floor in a terrified, weeping ball. We huddled around him, coaxing him out of the hallway with parlor tricks and soothing songs. Even though we still hummed with the frequency of the attic's greedy pull, none of us begrudged Kenneth's slow transition. Dying is frightening. It takes time to become used to insubstantiality, to bodilessness. In this house, we have each other to ground us. While we might be something less than human, together we are more than we once were. When Callie sleeps at night, we try to stay quiet. Giles stills his chains. Susan and Rose tuck themselves into a closet where they can whisper among the coats. Even Kenneth, who's itching to have a chase with Jekyll, resists waking him. But Francis just can't help himself. He's found himself beneath the trap door again, rope dangling above. And because he's Francis, he reaches for it. The first 2 times, the rope swishes right through his hand, but the 3rd time, he catches it. The creak as the trapdoor opens takes even Francis by surprise. A skeletal staircase slides downward, landing at the end of its track with a sound like the clapping of hands. We can't believe the noise doesn't wake Callie, but she's so used to Francis's periodic disruptions that she simply flips over and buries her head beneath the blankets. We gather in the hallway. We can't not. The air that wafts downward is thick. It settles on us in a mist of unease. We feel dizzy and disoriented. We feel as though we were all stuffed full of cotton. We feel, and we are unused to feeling. Francis reaches a shaking, insignificant hand to close the door. But before he solidifies enough to make contact, Jekyll runs past in a flash of black and white, darting up the stairs and into the shadows of the attic. Susan's mouth opens so wide, her face elongates like pulled taffy. Giles trembles, his chains skittering on the floor. Francis's hand hovers halfway through the staircase. For a moment, we wonder if he'll simply push the stairs back up and shut the door, leaving Jekyll to his fate. But even Francis isn't that terrible. Like the house, Jekyll is ours. Losing him would be like losing part of our own scaffolding. It is a fate none of us want to contemplate. We have to bring him back down. Floating up into the trapped door is as easy as releasing a clenched fist. Once inside the attic, our dizziness intensifies, but it's different for each of us. For Giles, it brings back the heat and dehydration of his jail cell. For Rose, it's the sensation of the airplane in free fall just before the crash. It reminds Kenneth of sitting in his car, hose running from the tailpipe to the cracked passenger window, swigging vodka while the fumes did their work. All of us silently scream, holding heads we don't have. All of us search for Jekyll. He finds us before we find him. His eyes, round as marbles, stare at us from a pitch-dark alcove. Rose reaches out a wispy hand, beckons with transparent fingers as she's seen Callie do countless times. But Jekyll doesn't blink, and he doesn't move. He's waiting for us to come to him. We edge closer, fighting the increasing feeling of dislocation. With each step, we worry our legs will simply pull free of our feet, that our heads will float like balloons toward the rafters. We huddle together to keep ourselves from dissipating into nothingness. And then we see it, the opening behind Jekyll. We can't decide if it's full of a deeper darkness or a strange light. Possibly it's both, half and half, like Jekyll's fur. The closer we get to the opening, the more dizzy we feel, as if we are trapped in the crushing weight of our non-existent bodies, but also as if our bodies are flying apart, as if we're losing the very thing that holds us together. Jekyll curls his tail around his paws and gives us a slow blink. Giles steps forward. He's been dead the longest of all, and whether that makes him brave or simply tired, we don't know. The rest of us cling together, watching his chains sway in the darkness. But as he approaches Jekyll, Giles grows less distinct. His edges soften and blend into shadow. We can see right through his torso into the opening that widens in front of him. It's as if the opening is swallowing Giles. It's as if Giles is dissolving into the opening. And we begin to lose our sense of Giles. We forget the weight of his chains bumping against us, the sound of their rattle. We forget the cupboard he most liked to haunt. We cannot call to mind the contours of his face, the feeling of his presence in the house. He is becoming something different, something not us. Francis knocks against the walls in warning. Susan's horrified face has stretched so that she is all mouth, her chin brushing against her feet. and she makes a sound of distress like floors settling. But Giles walks straight past Jekyll. He doesn't stop. His hair, the hem of his pants, even the tips of his fingers become gossamer and fog-like, drifting toward the opening like a candle flame toward an open window. He is a ball of yarn unwinding. The opening is unraveling him, strand by strand, and we can't stop it. Rose shrieks like a tree breaking in the wind, and Francis tumbles a set of boxes in a far corner. And still Jekyll sits with wide, placid eyes, as if nothing at all is wrong. And then the chains Giles has worn since he died, an echo of the chains that shackled him in his jail cell when he was a young living man, fall away and clatter silently to the floor. Giles lifts and turns his wrists, smooth and bare for the first time in centuries. And even as his body grows more and more transparent, even as he breaks apart entirely, he turns to us with an expression like an indrawn breath. He's bathed in darkness and light for a shining moment, and then he's gone. Later, after we've fled the attic, after we've hidden behind mirrors and inside closets and beneath beds, we'll debate whether Jekyll is an angel or a demon. We'll avoid him when he yawns and stretches and laps water from his dish. Even Kenneth will not try to catch Jekyll's eye. We'll watch Kelly close the trap door the next morning and wonder what she's thinking. We'll wonder if Giles is still Giles somewhere. We'll stay here in our house. Some of us will forgive Jekyll. Some of us will even forgive Francis. We'll remain us. We'll remain. Giles will grow less and less distinct in our memory, like a long ago story we used to tell. But we'll always remember his chains falling. We'll remember how he seemed to shed himself like an old skin, how even after the opening erased him, it yawned wider, an insatiable gullet. We'll never stop wondering what it meant. We'll look nervously at the trap door and wonder when it will be our turn to follow. The end. So hopefully you enjoyed both of those stories as much as I did. Let me know what you thought of them in the comments. If you like these videos, click like and subscribe for more. Let me know your suggestions and come back next time for more. Good night.